I am Joshua, 32 years old, and I never thought my dedication to health would be the very thing my family used to try and kill me. Before I tell you about the moment I woke up in a hospital bed with a team of police officers standing over my family, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. It was a Tuesday, a day that felt like any other in my disciplined, structured life. The air conditioning in the gym was blasting, fighting a losing battle against the heat of the bodies moving in rhythm with the heavy bass of the music. This was my sanctuary. My business, a chain of successful real estate offices across the state, demanded constant mental energy. But here, among the iron and the steel, things were simple. You push the weight moves. Cause and effect. There were no hidden agendas, no lies, no manipulation, just gravity and effort. I sat on the bench press, wiping sweat from my forehead with a towel. I had just finished a heavy set of chest presses, pushing 300 pounds. My heart was pounding a steady, strong rhythm against my ribs. I felt good, powerful. I had worked hard for this life. I had worked hard for the Lamborghini Urus parked outside, for the custom-built home in the hills, and for the peace of mind that came with financial freedom. But as I sat there, catching my breath, I reached for my stainless steel water bottle. It was a heavy, expensive bottle, designed to keep water ice cold for 24 hours. I unscrewed the cap. Condensation slicked the metal sides. I tilted my head back and took a long, deep swig. The water hit the back of my throat, cold and refreshing. But then, a taste. It was subtle at first, a metallic tang, then something bitter, like almonds that had been burnt to a crisp. I lowered the bottle, frowning. I swirled the water around. Maybe I hadn't rinsed the soap out properly? I took another small sip to test it. That was a mistake. Within seconds, the room tilted. The mirrored walls of the gym seemed to stretch and warp like a funhouse attraction. A sudden wave of nausea rolled over me, so violent and intense that I doubled over, dropping the heavy steel bottle. It hit the rubber mat with a deafening clang that cut through the music. "Hey, man? You good?" I heard the voice of Mike, one of the trainers, but it sounded like he was speaking from underwater. I tried to answer. I tried to say, "I'm dizzy," but my tongue felt swollen, heavy in my mouth. My throat constricted. Felt like a fist was closing around my windpipe. I gasped for air, but my lungs refused to expand. My vision began to tunnel. The bright fluorescent lights above me blurred into streaks of blinding white. My legs, usually so strong, turned to jelly. I slid off the bench, my knees hitting the floor hard. "Code Blue. We need a medic over here." Joshua's down. Mike's voice was frantic now. I was on my back. The ceiling tiles were spinning. Faces appeared above me. Concerned, terrified faces of other gym-goers. I saw a woman in pink leggings cover her mouth in shock. I saw a guy with headphones pulled down around his neck shouting into his phone. My body began to convulse. It wasn't a choice. Every muscle fiber seized up, locking my limbs in a rigid, painful spasm. Foam bubbled at the corners of my lips. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Am I dying? The thought was clear, cold, and terrifying. Is this a heart attack? A stroke? Paramedics burst through the double doors. I saw their uniforms, the flash of the defibrillator case. They were moving with practiced urgency. Male, early 30s, possible seizure. One of them shouted, "Check his airway." A mask was pressed over my face. Oxygen forced its way into my nose, but it didn't help the burning in my stomach. Felt like I had swallowed a handful of hot coals. Then, I heard something that cut through the fog of my fading consciousness. What did he consume? Did he take any pre-workout? A paramedic asked, holding up my steel water bottle. He unscrewed the cap and shined a penlight inside. There was a pause, a silence that felt heavier than the weights I had just lifted. "Jesus," the paramedic whispered. "Officer, get over here." A police officer, who had been patrolling the parking lot and responded to the call, stepped into my field of vision. "Look at the sediment," the paramedic said, his voice trembling slightly. Bottom of the bottle. That's not protein powder. It's not dissolving. And smell that? Bitter almonds. The officer leaned in, took a cautious sniff, and recoiled immediately. His hand instinctively went to his radio. Dispatch, we have a possible 187 situation at the Ironclad gym. I need a hazmat unit and detectives on scene immediately. We have a suspected poisoning. I repeat, suspected poisoning. Poisoning? The word echoed in my mind. Who would poison me? I had business rivals, sure. I had fired incompetent employees. But poison? That was personal. That was intimate. As the darkness finally began to claim me, dragging me down into a black void, a singular image flashed in my mind. It was from this morning. My kitchen island. My gym bag sitting open. And my sister, Ruby. She had been standing over it. When I walked in, she had jumped, her hand deep inside the bag. She had flashed that innocent, wide-eyed smile, the same smile she used to get money out of our parents. Just looking for gum, Josh. You know I love that mint stuff you buy. I had believed her. Or rather, I had brushed it off because it was easier than starting a fight before work. But now, as my heart rate monitor screamed a flatline warning and the paramedics charged the paddles, I knew the truth. She wasn't looking for gum. She was planting my death. The last thing I felt was the jolt of electricity hitting my chest, and the last thing I thought was a promise. If I survive this, I will destroy them. To understand why my own sister would try to murder me in broad daylight, you have to understand the dynamic of my family. You have to go back 3 months, to the day the parasite returned to its host. I was sitting in my office, reviewing the quarterly salary reports for my employees, feeling a sense of pride. I had built this company from the ground up. I came from a lower middle-class background, but I had clawed my way to the top of the real estate game in Arizona. I drove a Lamborghini Urus not because I was flashy, but because I loved engineering, I loved power, and frankly, because I could. My phone rang. The screen displayed, "Mom." I hesitated. Calls from my mother, Maria, were rarely about checking in on my well-being. They were usually transactional. "Hello, Mom," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Joshua." "Oh, thank God you picked up." Her voice was shrill, bordering on hysteria. "It's Ruby. It's your sister. It's a disaster." I sighed, rubbing my temples. Ruby was 26 years old, but in my parents' eyes, she was a perpetual toddler who needed constant coddling. What happened now? Did she quit another job? She didn't quit. She was fired unfairly. Mom snapped, her tone instantly shifting from panic to defense. Her boss was a tyrant, but that's not the point. Her landlord kicked her out, Joshua. Today. She's on the street. My baby is on the street with her suitcases. Mom, she's an adult. She can get a hotel. She can get a cheaper apartment. I told her that luxury complex was too expensive for her income. How can you be so cold? Mom started crying. A sound that used to tear me apart but now just annoyed me. We don't have room. Your father's back is bad. We can't have her sleeping on the couch. You have that massive house in the hills. You have 4 bedrooms, Joshua, and you live there all alone with your ego. I don't live with my ego, Mom. I live with peace and quiet. I shot back. And Ruby is messy. She's loud. She doesn't respect boundaries. It's just for a few weeks. My father, Martin, chimed in. He must have been listening on speaker. Just until she gets her settlement from the divorce. Yes, the divorce. Ruby had been married for 6 months to a guy she met in Vegas. When it imploded, she claimed she was entitled to half his assets. She wasn't. There was a prenup. But my parents insisted she was due a massive payout any day now. They lived in a fantasy world where Ruby was a victim of circumstance, not a victim of her own terrible choices. Fine, I said, a word I would come to regret deeply. 2 weeks. That's it. If she's not out in 14 days, I'm changing the locks. You're a good son, Joshua, Mom sniffled. I knew you'd do the right thing. Family helps family. Family helps family. That was their mantra. But in our house, it only flowed one way, from me to them. Ruby arrived that evening in a taxi she expected me to pay for. She dragged 3 massive pink suitcases into my foyer, scratching the marble floor with a broken wheel. "Wow," she said, looking around my minimalist, modern living room. "It's so cold in here. You really need a woman's touch, Josh. Maybe some throw pillows? A rug that isn't gray." "Hello to you too, Ruby," I said, ignoring her critique. "Guest room is downstairs. Don't go upstairs. That's my master suite and my office. Off limits." She rolled her eyes, popping a piece of gum. "Relax, Warden. I'm not going to steal your precious secrets." The first week was tolerable. She slept until noon, watched TV all afternoon, and ordered takeout on my credit card, which she had, accidentally, saved to her Uber Eats account. I let it slide. I was busy closing a deal on a commercial complex downtown. But by the second week, the cracks began to show. I came home one evening to find a party in full swing. My living room was filled with strangers, people smoking vape pens on my leather sofa, drinking my expensive scotch directly from the bottle. Ruby was in the center of it all, wearing one of my oversized dress shirts as a dress, laughing maniacally. "Ruby!" I roared, cutting the music. "Everybody out. Now!" The guests scrambled like cockroaches. Ruby stood there, swaying slightly, looking defiant. "You embarrassed me," she slurred. "I was just networking. These are important people. These are moochers, Ruby. Just like..." I stopped myself. "Just like me." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Say it. You think you're better than us, don't you? Because you got lucky? Because you have money? It's not luck, Ruby. It's work. Something you should try." I kicked everyone out and spent the night cleaning up vomit from the patio. The next morning, I called my parents. "She has to go," I told them. "She threw a party. She's destroying my house." "Oh, Joshua, stop exaggerating," Dad said dismissively. "She's young. She's blowing off steam. She's stressed about the custody battle." "Custody? She doesn't have kids." "Custody of the dog, Joshua. Her ex-husband kept the Pomeranian. It's devastating for her. You have no empathy." I hung up, shaking with rage. I realized then that I wasn't fighting Ruby. I was fighting a 3-headed monster. My parents were the shield, and Ruby was the sword. Things escalated. Cash started missing from my wallet. My protein powder was replaced with cheap filler. My car keys were moved. It was psychological warfare. One night, I came home to find Ruby in my office. She was at my desk, shuffling through papers. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. She jumped, shoving a folder behind her back. "Nothing. I was looking for a pen." "Why are you so paranoid?" I walked over and snatched the folder from her hands. It was my estate planning file. My will. My life insurance policies. "Why are you looking at this?" I demanded. "Mom asked me to organize your office," she lied, her face flushing red. "She worries about you. She says you work too hard and you don't have anyone to look after your affairs if, something happens." "Nothing is going to happen to me," I said, locking the folder in my safe. "And if it does, my lawyer handles it. Not you. Not Mom." Ruby stared at me then. It wasn't the look of a sister. It was a cold, calculating assessment. It was the look of a predator sizing up prey that was proving difficult to take down. "You never know, Josh," she whispered, a smile playing on her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "Accidents happen every day, especially to people who think they're invincible." That night, I installed a lock on my office door. But I didn't realize that the threat wasn't just in the office. It was everywhere. It was in the air I breathed, the food I ate, and the water I drank. The parasite had dug in deep, and it was getting hungry. The morning of the incident, the tension in the house was so thick you could choke on it. I had given Ruby an ultimatum the night before. Be out by the weekend, or I call the police for trespassing. My parents had screamed at me over the phone for an hour, calling me selfish, arrogant, and ungrateful. They threatened to cut me off, which was hilarious, considering I paid for their mortgage. I woke up early, around 5 a.m., adhering to my routine. Control the morning, control the day. That was my philosophy. I headed to the kitchen to prepare my pre-workout mix and pack my gym bag. My bag was sitting on the kitchen island, where I had left it the night before. But the zipper was slightly open. I froze. I was meticulous. I always zipped my bag. I walked softly into the kitchen. The lights were off, but the faint glow of the street lamps filtered through the blinds. There, standing over my bag, was Ruby. She was wearing her silk robe, her hair messy from sleep. One hand was deep inside the main compartment of my duffel bag. "Ruby," I said, flipping on the light switch. She jumped a foot in the air, spinning around. Her hand flew behind her back. For a split second, I saw panic in her eyes. Pure, unadulterated terror. But just as quickly, the mask slid back into place. "Jesus, Josh, you scared me," she laughed, but the sound was brittle. "What are you doing with my bag?" I asked, stepping closer. I looked at her hand behind her back. "Show me your hands." "Chill out, Rambo," she scoffed, bringing her hand forward. She was holding a small pack of spearmint gum. "I was just looking for gum. I have a bad taste in my mouth and I'm out." "You always buy the good kind." I looked at the gum. It was my brand. But something felt wrong. The air shifted. "You woke up at 5 a.m. to steal gum?" I asked, skeptical. "I couldn't sleep. Stress, you know? Being evicted by your own brother tends to keep a girl up." She popped a piece of gum into her mouth, chewing exaggeratedly. "Are we done with the interrogation? Can I go back to bed before you kick me out onto the street?" She sashayed past me, bumping my shoulder. "Have a good workout. Bro, don't push yourself too hard. You're not as young as you used to be." I watched her disappear down the hallway. I looked back at my bag. My water bottle was in the side mesh pocket. It was shifted. The logo usually faced out. Now it faced in. I walked over to the bag. I didn't touch it immediately. I stared at the bottle. It was the stainless steel one I used every day. I reached out and unscrewed the cap. The seal was broken. I had filled it last night, and I always tightened it to the max to prevent leaks in the car. This time it turned easily. Too easily. Paranoia? Maybe. But in my line of work, gut instinct was everything. If a deal felt wrong, I walked away. This felt wrong. I took the bottle out. I didn't drink it. Instead, I carried it upstairs to my bathroom. I have a degree in chemistry. Before I went into real estate, I was a pharmacist. I kept a small supply of testing kits in my master bathroom, mostly for checking water quality at new investment properties, but I also had some more advanced reagents left over from my old days. I poured a small sample of the water into a glass beaker. It looked clear. I sniffed it. There it was. That faint, barely perceptible scent. Bitter almonds. My blood ran cold. Cyanide smells like bitter almonds. But cyanide is unstable in water. There were other things. Worse things. I used a broad-spectrum alkaloid reagent test. It was a simple color change test. If the water was pure, it would stay clear or turn slightly blue. I added 3 drops of the reagent. I held my breath. The liquid swirled, then instantly turned a deep, violent purple-black. Positive. High concentration of alkaloids. I dropped the dropper. It shattered in the sink. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't laxatives to make me shit my pants at the gym for a laugh. This was lethal. My sister, my baby sister whose diaper I had changed, whom I had taught to ride a bike, had just tried to kill me. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the purple liquid. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so profound it felt like magma in my veins. Why? The money, the insurance, the inheritance. If I died today, accidentally, or from a heart attack at the gym, who benefits? I was single, no kids. My next of kin were my parents. And by extension, Ruby. They would get the house, the business, the cars, the accounts. Everything I had built over 10 years of blood and sweat would be theirs to liquidate and squander on gambling and luxury trips. I stood up. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, but my eyes were hard. I could call the police right now. I could hand over the bottle. But what would happen? Ruby would cry. She'd say she didn't do it. She'd say I tampered with it to frame her. My parents would back her up. Joshua hates her. He's trying to send her to jail. It would be he said, she said. The evidence was in my house, in my possession. A defense lawyer would tear it apart. No, I needed more. I needed undeniable proof. I needed to catch them in the act. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Detective Vance. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. Vance, it's Joshua. Joshua Reynolds. Josh? Damn, haven't heard from you since high school football. What's going on? You looking to buy the precinct building? No, I said, my voice steady. I need to report a murder plot. Who's the target? Me. There was a silence on the line. Talk to me. My sister poisoned my water bottle. I tested it. It's lethal. I need your help to catch her. But we have to do it my way. I need them to think they succeeded. Vance listened. He was a good cop, smart. He understood the family dynamic in this town. If we do this, Vance said, it's risky. You have to play the victim. You have to go to the gym. You have to collapse. We need paramedics in on it. We need a controlled environment. I can do it, I said. And Josh, if you're wrong, if this is just dirty water. It's not, I said, looking at the black liquid in the beaker. She wants me dead, Vance. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. A dead body. Let's see what she does with it. I hung up. I poured the poison water into a secure sample jar I had, labeling it clearly. Then, I rinsed the steel bottle thoroughly, scrubbing it until it was spotless. I filled it with fresh tap water. Then, I reached into my safe and pulled out a small baggie of non-toxic white powder creatine. I sprinkled a little bit at the bottom, just enough to leave a residue that looked suspicious but was harmless. I zipped my bag. I put on my gym clothes. I walked downstairs. Ruby was asleep on the couch again. I looked at her one last time. Goodbye, Ruby, I whispered. I walked out the door, got into my Lamborghini, and drove to the gym to stage my own death. The drive to the gym was surreal. I was driving a $250,000 machine, the engine purring like a beast, the Arizona sun rising over the desert mesas, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was beautiful. It was the kind of morning that made you glad to be alive. And I was driving toward an event where I would have to pretend to leave it all behind. I pulled into the empty parking lot of a strip mall 3 blocks away from the gym. A black, unmarked sedan was waiting. Detective Vance stepped out. He looked older than I remembered, gray at the temples, but his eyes were sharp. He was holding a small case. Josh, he nodded. You sure about this? Never been more sure, I said. I handed him the sample jar with the purple liquid residue. Lab this. It's the real deal. Vance handed it to a uniformed officer in the car. Rush it. I want a full talk screen within the hour. He turned back to me. Okay, here's the play. You go in. You do your workout. Keep it normal. There are cameras everywhere in that gym, right? Yeah. High def. Good. We need the footage of you drinking from the bottle and going down. It has to look real. The paramedics are stationed around the corner. They know the drill. They'll treat it as a real code until you're in the ambulance. Then we switch. He handed me a small button camera. Clip this to your gym bag. Face it towards the locker room if you can, or just keep it on your person. We also need audio. He handed me a wire. I can't wear a wire lifting weights, I said. It'll show through the shirt. Fine. Put this in your pocket. He gave me a high-sensitivity recorder. Just keep it on. We need to capture anything that happens afterwards. My family. They'll come to the hospital? We'll notify them as soon as you're stabilized, but critical. We'll bring them into the room. That's where the trap springs. If they're guilty, they won't be mourning. They'll be planning. I nodded, clipping the button camera onto the strap of my gym bag. It looked like a generic branding rivet. One more thing, Vance said. If you feel actual symptoms, if you messed up the swap. I didn't, I said. I washed that bottle 3 times. The water inside is tap. Okay. Good luck, Josh. Break a leg. Or, I drove the rest of the way to the gym. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. This was the hardest acting gig of my life. I walked into the gym. The smell of rubber and sweat was familiar, grounding. I nodded to the regulars. I saw Mike, the trainer. He gave me a thumbs up. He didn't know. Nobody knew except Vance and the medical team. I started my routine. Warm-up, stretching. I felt hyper-aware of everything. The way the light hit the floor. The sound of plates clanking. Every time I looked at my bag, I felt a spike of adrenaline. She tried to kill me. The thought kept looping. My own sister. I did my sets. Bench press. Incline. Flies. I pushed myself harder than usual, channeling the anger into the iron. I wanted to be exhausted. I wanted to look wrecked. Finally, the moment came. I was sweating profusely. My breathing was heavy. I sat on the bench. I looked at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. Action. I reached for the bottle. I unscrewed it. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. What if I didn't clean it enough? What if the residue is enough to kill me? No. Trust the process. I took a swig. The water was warm now, tepid tap water. Tasted like fluoride and plastic. I counted to 3. 1, 2, 3. I let the bottle slip from my fingers. Clang. I threw my head back, letting out a guttural groan. I squeezed my eyes shut. I slid off the bench, letting my body go limp. My knees hit the floor. I rolled onto my back. I started to shake. I had seen a seizure once in college. I mimicked the rigidity, the jerking motions. I bit my tongue hard to draw a little blood. I let saliva pool in my mouth and bubble out. Hey, man. Joshua. The chaos erupted. It was terrifyingly real. People were screaming. Hands were on me. Call 911. I kept my eyes rolled back, twitching. I heard the sirens way faster than normal, Vance's team. Clear the way. The paramedics were on me. I felt the cold stickers of the EKG pads. BP is elevated. Heart rate rapid. That was real. My adrenaline was through the roof. Bag the evidence. I heard one paramedic whisper the code phrase. They loaded me onto the stretcher. As they wheeled me out, past the staring faces of the gym crowd, I let my body go completely limp. The doors of the ambulance closed. The siren wailed. Immediately, the paramedic, a woman named Sarah, stopped chest compressions. She looked at me. You can stop shaking now, honey. You're clear. I gasped, sitting up, wiping the bloody foam from my mouth. How did it look? Like you were checking out, she said, impressed. Detective Vance is following in the unmarked unit. We're taking you to St. Mary's. We have a private room set up in the ICU. No nurses in or out except our team. I lay back down, staring at the roof of the ambulance. The physical part was over. Now came the psychological torture. I had to lay in a bed and wait for my family to come and dance on my grave. The hospital room was staged to perfection. The blinds were drawn. The only light came from the blinking monitors surrounding my bed. I was hooked up to a ventilator, though the tube was just resting in the side of my mouth, taped in place to look invasive. And 4 drip was running saline into my arm. The rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor was hypnotic. Detective Vance stood in the corner, concealed behind the heavy curtain of the bathroom door, which was cracked slightly open. A high-fidelity camera was hidden in the flower arrangement on the bedside table. They're here, Vance whispered into his earpiece, then signaled to me. Showtime. Don't move. Shallow breaths. I closed my eyes. I focused on slowing my breathing. I relaxed every muscle. I entered a meditative state I used for heavy lifting. The door creaked open. Oh my God! It was my mother. The performance began immediately. My baby! Look at him. Oh, Joshua! I felt a hand on my arm. It was warm, trembling. If I didn't know better, I would have believed her grief. She was sobbing, a wet, heaving sound. Is he gone? That was Dad. His voice wasn't sad. It was anxious. He's in a coma. A doctor, actually a police forensic specialist in a white coat, said, the toxin has caused massive organ failure. We're keeping him comfortable, but you should prepare yourselves. It's a matter of hours, maybe minutes. Oh, Jesus, Dad muttered. But then, almost immediately, the tone shifted. Did he have the paperwork on him? Martin. Not now. Mom hissed, but her hand left my arm. She moved away from the bed. We have to know, Maria. If he dies without us having power of attorney or the keys to the safe, the state freezes everything. You know how probate works. It takes years. The doctor said he's dying, Dad. Ruby's voice cut in. She sounded bored. Disconnected. Just check his bag. Where are his clothes? Over there on the chair, the doctor said. I'll give you some privacy. The door clicked shut. I lay there, listening to the shuffle of footsteps. Okay, look in the pockets, Dad commanded. I'm looking, Ruby snapped. I heard the rustle of my gym shorts. Here's his wallet. Credit cards. Cash. About $200. Cheapskate. Keys. Where are the keys to the house and the safe? Mom asked, her weeping completely gone now. Her voice was sharp, predatory. Got 'em, Ruby said. The jingle of my keys. Lamborghini keys too. Shotgun on the car. You are not driving that car, Ruby, Dad said. We sell that first. That's at least 200 grand cash. That pays off the shark. The shark? I mentally noted that. They were in debt to loan sharks? That explained the desperation. Whatever, Ruby said. I just want the insurance payout. Did you check the policy, Mom? Am I a beneficiary? We're all beneficiaries, honey, Mom soothed. $1 million. Double indemnity for accidental death. Poisoning counts as an accident if we play it right. We just say he ate something bad at a street stall or took some bad supplements. He suspected me, Ruby laughed. It was a cold, chilling sound. This morning, he caught me in his bag. I thought I was busted. I had to pull the gum excuse. He looked at me like he wanted to kill me. But he drank it. The idiot actually drank it. You used the ricin? Dad asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. Yeah, mixed with the protein powder like we talked about. But I put some in the water too just to be sure. He's such a health freak. I knew he'd hydrate. Good girl, Mom said. You did what you had to do. He wasn't helping us. He was letting us drown, Ruby. He has millions and he made you sleep in a guest room? He made us beg for grocery money? He deserves this. He deserves this. The words hit me harder than any physical blow. My mother, the woman who gave birth to me, she didn't just condone my murder. She justified it as a moral correction. To them, my success was a theft from their potential happiness. Okay, he's fading, Ruby observed, standing over me. I felt her breath on my face. Look at the monitor. The beeps are getting slower. She reached out. I felt her cold fingers touch the expensive Rolex on my wrist. I'll take this for safekeeping, she whispered, before the coroner steals it. She began to undo the clasp. That was it. The limit. My eyes snapped open. Ruby screamed. It was a guttural shriek of pure horror. She stumbled back, dropping the watch. I sat up, ripping the tape off my face, spitting out the ventilator tube. Hello, family, I rasped. He's alive. Martin, he's alive. Do something. Mom shrieked, backing against the wall. Dad looked around wildly, grabbing a heavy metal tray from the table. He saw us. He heard us. Put it down, Martin. Detective Vance burst out of the bathroom, weapon drawn. At the same moment, The main door flew open and 4 uniformed officers flooded the room. "Police! Drop the weapon! Get on the ground! Now!" Vance bellowed. Dad dropped the tray, his hands shaking violently. "It's not what it looks like. He was having a seizure. We were trying to help." "Save it for the judge," Vance said, advancing on them. "We have the whole thing on video. Every word. The insurance fraud, the ricin, the loan shark. It's all recorded." Ruby was hyperventilating in the corner. She looked from me to the police, her eyes wide with the realization that her life was over. "Joshua," she whimpered, reaching out a hand. "Josh, please. It was a joke. We were just role-playing. I didn't mean it." I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up. I felt strong. I felt invincible. "You took my watch," I said, pointing at the Rolex on the floor. "And you tried to take my life. The joke's over, Ruby. Cuff them," Vance ordered. I watched as the officers slammed my father against the wall, wrenching his arms behind his back. My mother was wailing, a pitiful, high-pitched sound. Ruby was silent now, staring at the floor, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of remorse, but tears of defeat. "Joshua, tell them," Mom screamed as they dragged her out. "I'm your mother. You can't let them take me. I changed your diapers. I loved you. You loved my money," I said coldly. "And now you're going to pay for it." As the room cleared, leaving only Vance and me, the silence returned. But the beep of the monitor was gone. It was just the sound of my own steady breathing. I was alive, and for the first time in my life I was truly free of them. 2 hours later, I sat behind the one-way mirror of the interrogation room at the precinct. I was dressed in fresh clothes Mike had brought from my gym locker, sipping a cup of black coffee. My hands were finally steady. Detective Vance stood next to me. "You don't have to watch this, Josh." "Yes," I said. "I do." In the interrogation room, Ruby sat alone. She was handcuffed to the table. The arrogance from the hospital room was gone. She looked small, pathetic, like a child who had broken a vase. Vance walked into the room and sat down opposite her. He placed a clear plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside was the water bottle. "So, Ruby," Vance started, his voice calm. "Lab results are back. Ricin. Lethal dose. Do you know how painful a death by ricin is? Takes days. Internal bleeding. Organ failure. It's agony. That's what you planned for your brother." "I didn't mean to kill him," Ruby sobbed. "I just wanted to make him sick. Just sick enough so he'd need care. So I could take over his finances while he recovered." "Bullshit." Vance slammed his hand on the table. Ruby jumped. "We heard the tape, Ruby. Double indemnity. Poisoning counts as an accident. You wanted the $1 million. Ruby stayed silent, biting her lip. "Here's the thing." Vance leaned in. "Your parents are in the next room. And they are talking. Boy, are they talking. Your dad says it was your idea. He says you owed money to the cartel." Ruby's head snapped up. "He said what?" "He said you got involved with some bad people, dealing fake diet pills, and you skimmed off the top. He says you dragged them into it. He says they only went along with it because you threatened to tell the police about their tax fraud if they didn't help you." "That liar!" Ruby screamed, her face twisting in ugly rage. "That old coward. It was his idea. He's the one who found the ricin recipe on the dark web. He's the one who owes the sharks." "Tell me," Vance said softly. Ruby unleashed a torrent of betrayal. "Dad has a gambling problem. He lost his pension 3 years ago. He's been borrowing from a guy named Razor in Phoenix. They threatened to burn down his house. He needed money fast. He told me if I did this, he'd give me half the insurance money to start a business. Mom knew. Mom drove him to pick up the beans to make the poison." I watched from behind the glass, feeling a hollowness in my chest. So that was it. Not just greed, but desperation. My father had gambled away their future, and instead of asking me for help, which I might have given on strict conditions, He decided to harvest me like a crop. Keep talking, Ruby, Vance said. If you cooperate, maybe we take the death penalty off the table. I have texts, Ruby yelled. Check my phone. Mom sent me the schedule of when Joshua goes to the gym. Dad sent me the link to the poison guide. It's all there. They made me do it. Vance looked at the mirror, looking at me, and gave a subtle nod. He had what he needed. We switched rooms. Now it was my parents. They were sitting together, huddled like frightened rats. Vance walked in and threw a file on the table. Your daughter just gave us everything. He lied, or told the partial truth. She gave us the text messages, the dark web history, the gambling debts. My father went pale. She's lying. She's unstable. She has proof, Martin, Vance said. Digital footprint doesn't lie. We know about Razor. We know about the debt. You tried to murder your son to pay off a bookie. My mother started to wail. We didn't have a choice. They were going to hurt us. So you decided to kill Joshua instead? Vance asked with disgust. Your own son. He wouldn't give us the money. Mom cried out, revealing the twisted logic of her soul. He has millions. He buys fancy cars. And we are suffering. It's not fair. He owed us. We raised him. I stood up behind the glass. I had heard enough. I'm done, I told the officer standing guard. I want to go home. You need to give a formal statement, Mr. Reynolds, the officer said. I will. Tomorrow. Right now, I need to get away from these people. As I walked out of the precinct, the sun was setting. The sky was a bruised purple, reminding me of the poison in the beaker. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my security system. Motion detected. Master bedroom. I checked the feed. It was empty. The house was empty. For the first time in 3 months, my house was truly mine again. But as I unlocked my car door, I realized the cost. I had my life. I had my money. But I was an orphan now. Not by death, but by choice. I drove home in silence. No music. Just the hum of the engine. I pulled into the driveway of my hillside mansion. I looked at the dark windows. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a fortress that had been breached from the inside. I walked inside. The air still smelled of Ruby's cheap perfume. I saw her pink suitcases in the hallway where the police had left them after the search. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a deep, exhausting sadness. But then I looked at the kitchen island. I looked at the spot where the gym bag had been. I took a deep breath. I was alive. I had survived the gym, the hospital, and the truth. I picked up Ruby's suitcases, walked to the front door, and threw them out onto the driveway. Then I went to the security panel and changed the codes. The parasite was gone. The host had survived. Now the healing could begin. The months following the arrest were a blur of legal depositions, meetings with the district attorney, and a suffocating silence that settled over my life like a heavy wool blanket. You might think that seeing your abusers in handcuffs is the end of the nightmare, but in reality, it is just the beginning of a different kind of torture. The criminal justice system is slow, grinding, and impartial. It strips away the emotion and leaves only the cold, hard facts. Facts that I had to relive over and over again. I remember sitting in the office of my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah who specialized in high-profile criminal cases. We were discussing the upcoming trial. The prosecution was going for the maximum sentence. Conspiracy to commit capital murder, insurance fraud, and several counts of aggravated assault. They are going to try to plead out, Sarah told me, tapping a pen against her legal pad. Your father's attorney is arguing diminished capacity due to gambling addiction. Your mother is claiming coercion. And Ruby is trying to cut a deal by testifying against both of them. I don't care about their deals, I said, my voice flat. I want them to stand in open court and admit what they did. I want it on the public record. It will be grueling, Joshua, she warned. They will attack your character. They will claim you were abusive, neglectful, that you drove them to desperation. It's a standard defense tactic. Are you ready for that? Let them try, I said. I have the tape. The recording from the hospital room. It was the smoking gun that no amount of defense spinning could make disappear. It captured the raw, unfiltered greed in their voices. It captured the moment my mother chose money over my life. The trial began on a scorching Tuesday in November, for months after the incident at the gym. The Superior Court of Arizona was packed. The story of the Ricin gym plot had made local headlines, and the gallery was full of curious onlookers, reporters, and neighbors who used to whisper about me behind my back. Now, they looked at me with a mixture of pity and awe, as if I were a ghost who had walked back from the grave. I sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table. When the bailiff announced the defendants, the air was sucked out of the room. They walked in, chained together at the ankles, wearing orange jumpsuits that clashed horribly with their pale, prison-deprived skin. My father, Martin, looked 20 years older. He shuffled, his head down, refusing to look at anyone. My mother, Maria, had lost her composure completely. She was weeping softly, clutching a tissue, looking around the room with wide, frightened eyes, as if searching for someone to save her. And then there was Ruby. She walked with her chin up. She had lost weight. Her hair, usually dyed and styled, was limp and brown. But her eyes, those eyes were still burning with a toxic mix of hatred and entitlement. When she passed my bench, she slowed down just for a fraction of a second. She locked eyes with me. There was no remorse, just a cold, hard glare that said, "You did this to me." The trial lasted 2 weeks. I took the stand on the third day. "Mr. Reynolds," the prosecutor asked, "can you describe your relationship with the defendants prior to the incident?" "I thought we were a family," I said into the microphone, my voice echoing slightly in the wood-paneled room. "I paid their mortgage. I paid for my sister's car. I thought I was helping them. I didn't realize I was just fattening them up for the slaughter." The defense attorney tried to paint me as a tyrant. He asked about the strict rules I had for Ruby living in my house. He asked about my obsession with money and my flashy lifestyle, bringing up the Lamborghini Urus repeatedly as if owning a nice car was a moral failing that justified murder. "Isn't it true, Mr. Reynolds, that you threatened to throw your sister out on the street with nothing?" he asked, pacing in front of the jury. "I threatened to evict an adult woman who was stealing from me and refusing to get a job," I corrected him calmly. "That is not abuse. That is boundaries." But the turning point, the moment that sealed their fate, was when the prosecution played the video. The courtroom went dead silent. On the large screens, the grainy footage from the hidden camera in the hospital flower arrangement played. The jury watched my mother's face as she discussed the double indemnity clause. They heard my father asking about the keys to the safe while he thought his son was dying. They heard Ruby's laugh, that chilling, dismissive laugh, when she admitted to poisoning the water. "He's such a health freak. I knew he'd hydrate." When the tape ended, I looked at the jury. 3 of them were wiping tears from their eyes. One juror, an older woman who looked a bit like my grandmother, was looking at my parents with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. My mother broke down. "I didn't mean it," she wailed from the defense table, causing the judge to bang his gavel. "We were just desperate. We needed the money for the loan sharks." It was over. The illusion of the poor, struggling family was shattered. They weren't victims. They were monsters who would eat their young to survive. The verdict came back in record time. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was the final nail in the coffin. The judge, a stern man with no patience for theatrics, looked down at them over his glasses. "In my 20 years on the bench," he said, his voice deep and resonating, "I have seen strangers kill for money. I have seen gangs kill for territory. But I have rarely seen a betrayal as intimate and calculated as this. You didn't just want his money. You wanted to erase him." Ruby was sentenced to 25 years in a maximum security prison. Because she was the one who physically administered the poison, her sentence was the harshest. She screamed when the gavel fell, a raw, animalistic sound that haunted my dreams for weeks. My parents were sentenced to 15 years each for conspiracy and attempted murder. Given their age and health, it was essentially a life sentence. But the punishment didn't end with prison time. The court ordered full restitution. I remember the meeting with my lawyer after the sentencing. We were discussing the inheritance they had been so desperate for. The court has seized their assets to pay for your legal fees and emotional damages, Sarah explained, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. Their house, your father's pension, what's left of it, their savings. It's all gone. I don't want their money, I said, feeling a wave of nausea. It's dirty. It's not about the money, Joshua, Sarah said gently. It's about stripping them of the means to hurt you again. And there's the matter of the debts. The loan sharks. The police investigation shut down the gambling ring your father was involved with. But the debts died with their assets. You are not responsible for them. You are free, Joshua. Completely. I walked out of her office into the bright Arizona sunlight. I was free, but I didn't feel light. I felt heavy. I felt the weight of a life that had been dismantled. I drove back to the house in the hills, the dream house that Ruby had hated so much. I walked through the front door and stood in the foyer. The silence was deafening. This house was a mausoleum. Every corner held a memory of a lie. The kitchen island where Ruby had stood with the poison. The guest room where she had plotted my death. The dining room where my parents had sat and eaten my food while smiling to my face, secretly counting the days until my funeral. I couldn't stay here. The next week, I initiated the purge. I hired a real estate agent to list the house. Sell it, I told her. I don't care about the price. Just get rid of it. Then came the things, the possessions. I looked at the Lamborghini Urus parked in the garage. It was a beautiful machine, a marvel of engineering. But every time I looked at it, I heard my father's voice on the tape. We sell that first. That's at least 200 grand. It wasn't a car anymore. It was a price tag on my head. I drove it to the dealership the next morning. The sales manager, a guy I knew well, looked surprised. Trading it in for the new model, Josh? He asked, running his hand over the hood. No, I said, handing him the keys. I'm selling it. Outright. Everything okay? He asked, sensing my mood. I'm downsizing, I said. I need something reliable. Something that doesn't draw attention. Something that can get me far away from here. I walked out of there with a check and a sturdy, nondescript Toyota Land Cruiser. Felt like I had shed a skin. The hardest part was the final cleanup of the house. I hired a crew to pack up everything. I donated my furniture to a shelter for victims of domestic violence. My clothes, my electronics, I gave it all away. I wanted to start with nothing. I wanted to build a life that had no fingerprints of the past on it. On my last day in Mesa, I stood in the empty living room. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the floor. A knock came at the door. It was Mrs. Gable, the neighbor who Ruby had lied to, the one who had looked at me with suspicion for months. She was holding a casserole dish. She looked ashamed. Joshua, she said, standing on the porch. I heard you were leaving. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for believing her, for judging you. I looked at this woman, a stranger who had been weaponized against me. I could have been angry. I could have told her to get off my property. But what was the point? She was just another victim of Ruby's manipulation. It's okay, Mrs. Gable, I said softly. She was very convincing. Where will you go? She asked. West, I said, towards the ocean. I need to see water that isn't poisoned. She nodded, understanding. She handed me the casserole. Good luck, Joshua. You deserve peace. I took the dish, thanked her, and watched her walk away. I locked the door for the last time. I left the keys under the mat for the realtor. I got into my Land Cruiser, looked at the house in the rearview mirror, and didn't look back. As I drove onto the highway, watching the city lights of Mesa fade into the distance, I realized that the trial wasn't the end. The verdict wasn't the end. This moment of driving into the dark, unknown future was the beginning. I had lost my family. I had lost my home. I had lost the version of myself that believed love was unconditional. But I had kept the one thing they couldn't take, my breath. I was breathing, and for now that was enough. 1 year later, the air here smells different. It smells of salt and iodine and wet cedar. I live in a small coastal town in Oregon now, about as far away from the dry heat of Arizona as you can get without leaving the country. The mornings here are gray and misty. I like the fog. It feels protective. It feels like a blanket that wraps around the world and muffles the noise. My life is smaller now, but it is denser. I don't own a chain of real estate offices anymore. I sold the business to my partner, Chris, who still sends me updates and checks, but I don't get involved in the day-to-day. The stress of that life, the constant chase for the next deal, the next million, it doesn't appeal to me anymore. Instead, I opened a small community gym. It's nothing like the Ironclad where I almost died. There are no mirrors on the walls, no neon lights, no influencers filming their workouts. It's an old warehouse with high ceilings and skylights. We focus on functional fitness, on rehabilitation, on helping people rebuild their bodies after injury or trauma. It's fitting, I think. I am rebuilding myself one rep at a time, alongside them. I haven't dated anyone seriously. The trust issues are real. When you look at someone you love and wonder if they are plotting your demise, it kills romance pretty quickly. I'm seeing a therapist, Dr. Eris. We talk a lot about the concept of the golden child and the scapegoat. We talk about how I spent my life trying to buy my parents' love, thinking that if I just became successful enough, if I just gave them enough, they would finally see me. But Dr. Eris told me something that stuck. You can't buy bread from a hardware store, Joshua. You were looking for love in a place that didn't stock it. I still have nightmares sometimes. In the dreams, I'm back in the hospital bed. The monitor is beeping. But when I open my eyes, it's not Ruby standing there. It's everyone I know. My friends, my employees, the mailman. They are all holding water bottles. They are all smiling. I wake up sweating, my heart hammering against my ribs. I have to get up, walk to the kitchen, and pour a glass of water from the tap. I stare at it. I smell it. Even after a year, the phantom smell of bitter almonds sometimes ghosts across my senses. But I drink it. I force myself to drink it. It's my act of defiance. I haven't visited them in prison. I never will. I received a letter from my mother about 6 months ago. The envelope had the prison stamp on it. I stood by my mailbox, the wind whipping my hair, holding that piece of paper. I could feel the manipulation radiating from it. I knew what it would say. We're sorry. We love you. We're suffering. Send money for the commissary. I didn't open it. I walked down to the beach, lit a match and watched it burn. The ashes scattered into the Pacific Ocean. I have, however, made new connections. Real ones. There's an older guy named Sam who comes to my gym. He's a retired carpenter. He doesn't want anything from me. He doesn't care about my past or my money. He just wants to fix his bad shoulder so he can pick up his grandkids. We grab coffee on Tuesdays. We talk about wood, about the weather, about the tides. The simple. It's transactional in the purest sense. Respect for respect. Last week, Sam invited me to his family barbecue. I hesitated. Family gatherings are triggering for me, but I went. I sat in his backyard watching his kids and grandkids run around. There was no tension, no passive-aggressive comments about money, no side eyes, just people eating burgers and laughing. Sam sat next to me and handed me a beer. You doing okay, Josh? You look a million miles away. I'm okay, Sam, I said. Just thinking about how different this is. Different from what? From what I used to think family was. Sam nodded. He didn't pry. He just clinked his bottle against mine. Family is a verb, son. It's what you do, not whose blood you got. Family is a verb. That phrase stayed with me. My parents and Ruby, they treated family as a noun, a possession, a status, a right. They thought they owned me because we shared DNA. But they never did family. They never protected, nurtured, or supported. They only took. I realized then that I am not an orphan. I am a free agent. I get to draft my own team now. And on my team, the entry requirement isn't blood. It's loyalty. It's integrity. It's the refusal to poison the well. I walked down to the water's edge this morning before recording this. The sun was rising, painting the fog a soft gold. I took a deep breath of the clean, salt air. I thought about the man I was in Arizona. The man in the Lamborghini. The man with the Rolex. He feels like a stranger to me now. He was a man trying to fill a hole in his soul with things, hoping those things would impress the people who were digging the hole deeper. I'm not that man anymore. I drive a Toyota. I wear a $20 digital watch. I live in a small cottage. But I am richer now than I ever was. Because I own my life. I own my safety. And for the first time, when I close my eyes at night, I don't have to listen for footsteps in the hallway. Educational conclusion and reflection before I sign off. I want to leave you with a thought that I hope lands deep in your heart. We are raised on the myth that family is sacred, that blood is thicker than water, and that you must stick by your kin no matter what. But my story is a brutal testament to the fact that toxic people are toxic, regardless of their last name. I learned the hard way that you cannot save people who are committed to their own destruction, especially when they view you as the fuel for their fire. If you are the responsible one, the fixer, or the banker in your family, I want you to pause and look at the dynamic. Is it love, or is it a transaction? Lesson. Protecting yourself is not betrayal. Saying no is not abandonment. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to cut the rope and let the anchor drop so you don't drown with the ship. I want to hear from you. What is the one red flag in a relationship, family or otherwise, that you ignored for too long? Or, if this story resonated with you and you're glad I survived to tell it, just comment the word good below. It tells me that we are connected, that my pain wasn't for nothing, and that we are all survivors in our own way. Thank you for listening. Thank you for walking this dark road with me. I'm Joshua, and I'm signing off to go drink a glass of water, clean, clear, and safe.